And it gets to the heart of what people pleasers spend a lot of time doing, which is performing what they think other people want to see from them.
Sarah, I just want to say thank you for spending a little time with me and welcome to the show. Why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about what you want us to best know about you?
First of all, I'm so happy to be here and thank you. I am a mom and a wife and a coach and a poet. And I think we have a lot in common about, wanting people to feel in integrity with the work they do and with themselves. And so that's kind of really my angle, is how do women get more into integrity with themselves? And I know how important a question that is, because for a long time I was living out of integrity with myself, and I didn't even really know it.
So when you hear that term good girl, what does that bring up for you?
As I have spent the last 7 years in this subject, what I have realized is that you and I come into this world as babies, and we are completely dependent on the big people in our lives. And I remember sitting in church with my daughter. She was doing what, babies do. And she took her hand and was playing with it. And then she smacked me on the face. And I grabbed her hand and I pushed her body away from my body. And I said, no.
Oh.
And what did she do?
Probably started crying. I'd imagine.
Started crying.
Got mad.
That's right. Yeah. She started crying because that was punishment. To be separated from my body, to see my eyebrows go down, and to hear the tone of my voice drop into something that felt, threatening, and not like the loving, connected voice that she usually heard from me. And so in that moment, she gets the message that she just did something bad and it resulted in something painful for her. And so she is trying to figure out, what did I do? And how do I not do that again? And so before either of us really knew what was going on, I was teaching her how to be my version of a good girl without even really knowing that that's what I was doing. And I want to go back for just a second to something that is also very normal in the way children grow up. As the adults who are taking care of them, and as adults who, love and cherish our children, sometimes we unintentionally contribute to separating them from the knowing that is in their bodies. In my house growing up, financial resources were scarce. And so one of the ways that showed up was you had to finish everything on your plate. That was just the rule. And I remember sitting at the table and my belly was full. And that kind of sick feeling when you keep eating after you're already full?
Yes.
I would have that. But my mom or dad would say, I don't care, finish what's on your plate. And so to please them, I had to disobey and disregard the feeling in my own body that I was full and that I'd had enough. Great. And so when we tell children, I don't care if you don't like him, he's your grandpa, go give him a hug and a kiss.
Ew.
Right? Or, you know what? You may not, I don't care if you're angry, you don't get to talk back to me. These are we hear them, they feel normal, and they almost feel, or they felt to me like, I'm the parent, I know what is best for you, and I'm going to tell you, and you have to do it.
What I'm hearing you say is that we're unintentionally telling our children not to trust their instincts.
That is it. That is it. The thing that you can do as a parent is to tell your child, you know what, your body knows when you're full. Your body knows what you like or you don't like. And it's my job to help protect that and to give you rules and structure and to help keep you safe, because I'm still your parent. Refer them back over and over to, well, what do you think? What does your body think? What feels good to you? And then compare that with our adult wisdom and brain and our, responsibility to take care of them. That hopefully will help to not separate them to the degree that most of us get separated, because it ends up being, do I do what I want, or do I, and risk getting punished, or do I do what my mom wants, which doesn't feel good to me?
Sometimes what I've seen a lot is that we attach maybe shame or even guilt with not being liked or going off the rails and not being good or not being nice. Why is guilt such a powerful force, especially for good girls? Because I have seen so many other people that are just like, I don't care. I'm not losing one bit of sleep over this.
There might be one definitive answer. I don't know if there is, because it depends very much on how each of us were raised.
Okay.
I was raised to believe, and I was taught that I was supposed to have good friends, be a good wife, be a good mother, a good sister, and that there were specific behaviors in my culture, in my, religious upbringing, in my community. Like, these behaviors mean you are a good whatever, right?
Right.
And so as I saw other people adopting those good roles and keeping those good girl rules, I loved these people. They were the people who loved and took care of me. So why would I not just kind of naturally fall into emulating them? That's just how we as mammals function in groups. There are norms, there are rules. And so it's a combination of knowing my groups, my culture, all the groups that I belong to. What was I taught to believe about myself? And then what is the cost of that? Because the cost is I'm constantly following someone else's script for my life instead of slowing down to ask myself, what do I want that life to look like?
When someone realizes that they're people pleasing, what's the first maybe internal shift that has to happen? So if I'm realizing, okay, yeah, I'm not liking this. I'm like full of resentment. I'm angry. I need to set new boundaries. But I'm just not, what has to happen with me first so that those things can kind of manifest themselves?
The first thing that has to happen is you have to have compassion for the fact that you are a people pleaser instead of judgment.
Ooh, okay.
So many of the women that I talk to, they say things like, I am a 48-year-old woman. What the hell is wrong with me? Mm-hmm. And so the first shift is to go from judgment and self-criticism to some generosity and some compassion. And I can drop this war with myself first.
It tends to be that people-pleasing women are their biggest self-critics. Why? Like, where did that, and you're not a therapist. I don't expect you to kind of dig into that. So I guess this is all to say that I appreciate your compassion. So that's kind of the first step, is saying, be compassionate with yourself. Remove the shame or the guilt or the criticism. And I want to hit on something we talked a little bit about just a few minutes ago around guilt and intuition, right? With our kids, making them feel guilty and not letting them honor what they feel is right. So how do you help women like to sort of separate guilt from actual intuition to honor their voice?
That is a really great question. And the simplest answer is this. If you can develop the skill of having your own back, which is essentially the commitment, I will not be my own bully. I will not criticize or judge or blame or second guess myself in mean ways. What that does is it frees you up to take risks, because sometimes we'll have a feeling and the question is this my intuition or is this just an idea, right? And we can spend a lot of time kind of spinning, trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. I think the better course of action there is, if something feels good to me and I like my reasons for trying it, I'm going to try it. And then if it succeeds, fantastic. I'm going to learn something. If it fails, I'm going to be so good and kind to myself, and I'm going to try something else.
We see a lot, and this is something I see a lot on social media. So we go from this kind of extreme of people pleasing and being kind and a good girl to opposite end over here. Well, oh yeah, well now I'm going to be whoever I want. And now I'm going to lean into my personal power. From your perspective, what does personal power actually look like in daily life? Not just sort of that social media reel.
Yeah, I love that question. To me, freedom is I can say what needs to be said. I can do what needs to be done, and I can take care of myself in a way that feels generous and loving and compassionate, no matter what happens.
I want to talk a little bit about values, like what changes do I have to make first so that I can be more aligned with my values?
The most common thing that I hear from women, well, no, a couple things, but one is, I don't even really know who I am and what I want. Like if I take away everybody else's expectations and the to-do list that is kind of handed to me by my husband, my job, the school, blah, blah, right? I don't know who I am in this. And so I love that question or that self-realization, that awareness, because that's the place to start. You get to do a beautiful, almost like investigation into who you are. I had a dream. I don't have dreams very often. And so I really remember this one. And my husband's favorite movie is The Matrix. I've never watched it all the way through. It really doesn't interest me. But this was like a pretty Matrixy type dream because I was standing in a room that was completely white. And everything that I had been taught to believe about myself was in these little black boxes kind of stacked up all around me. And they kind of were like walling me in. And I had the sense that with my power, right, I could raise my arms. And in my dream, I did. And I pushed the boxes like back and they all kind of flew away from me. And then I was standing in the middle of this white room, just me. And then I asked myself, what do I believe? Do I still believe in God?
Right.
I was like, I think I do. And so I reached out and I took the God box and I dragged it back close to me. Like, do I still believe that I want to be married to my husband? I think I do. And and so I just went through the process of like asking myself, when I think about believing this or doing this, how does it feel to me? Is it a yes or a no? Does it feel warm? Does it feel cold? Does it feel like or There's lots of different ways that we can kind of feel that. But my values now are, I believe in a God who above all wants me to know me. You know, I was created to be known first by me. And then when I deeply know and love myself, there is a generosity that comes out of that for other people. And I feel like that is actually the kind of love that energizes and invigorates me to want to do things for other people in a genuine way. And so I'm always having to check with that inner, knowing and love, like, do I want to do this? And it's everything from, do I want to go to this New Year's party, knowing that the expectation is that I'm going to stay until midnight. I want to be in bed early at 9:30. Right. That is, one of the things I've learned about myself is that I was kind of playing the part of an extrovert. That's what was rewarded. That's what got me all of the kudos and we love you so much, Sarah. And when I go home at 9:30, everybody's like, what are you doing? But I'm honoring the part of me that is the most important part of me, which is my knowing of what is good and best and right for me.
Your power, your intuition, which is very contrarian to, and give me a second to my thought. It's so counterintuitive because as I'm looking here, our values, we've been living off somebody else's value system. And we've kind of been told that to be a good girl or to be a nice girl, whatever that is to honor other people's wants and desires. And that honoring ours is a selfish thing.
When I start talking to a woman about how I'm going to help her stop people pleasing and connect to herself, her first worry is, well, I don't want to be selfish, because that's like kryptonite for women, right? To call them selfish. And they live in such a way that everybody else and their needs and expectations are here, and they are here. Everybody else is more important. Their needs, their expectations are more important than theirs. And what they think we're going to do is invert that, where now they're the most important person in every single interaction and room and relationship, and everybody else is beneath them or below them. And I think they're rightly concerned about that because that doesn't feel good. And what I'm talking about is this, where I matter just as much and my feelings and needs are just as important as everyone else's. Because as a mom, Sometimes we do choose our children, or we choose our partners, or we choose to stay late on a job at work, or we choose to sacrifice in a friendship. But when we do it liking our reasons, and when we do it kind of guided by that inner knowing of like, okay, yeah, I think this is good, then what we have is equity in our relationships. And sometimes I choose you, and sometimes I choose me.
And let's kind of pivot for a minute because okay, look, a lot of people talk about confidence and let's set boundaries and we've been talking about self-trust and all of these things, but your work is really specific. Do you mind just maybe walking us through what your approach is like, why it's different?
Yes. There's a lot of great advice that you will hear out there on the internet, like just set a boundary. And my brain always goes, well, how? How do I do that? And what do I do with this overwhelming fear that comes up? And so my approach is a little different in that, first of all, we have to make the switch to, I'm a bad person who can't stop people pleasing too. Of course, I'm a people pleaser. That's what I was taught, and I can have compassion for that. And so when we can get some of that compassion online, then we're not having to deal with constant self-criticism. So we talked about kind of that first important shift.
Okay.
Then we need to figure out, where are you shifting into pleasing other people automatically, and which of those situations are really high stakes and which are lower stakes? Because, for example, I had a client who walked to work. She passed by the same Starbucks every single day. She got her coffee. Several times a week, she got the wrong coffee. It was a very busy, bustly Starbucks, and she would just drink it. Right? She's like, well, I guess we'll just try again tomorrow. And so when we were kind of talking through all of her options, she also had a very strained relationship with her father. And so when we're talking about, do you want to start with Starbucks or with your father? We're going to start with lower stakes situations first, because the risk doesn't feel as high. And what she needed and what I teach, there are specific skills. How to say no, how to hold and set a boundary, how to have your own back, how to have difficult conversations, how to trust yourself.
Hey, it's Allie just popping in real fast to ask, do you have a hard conversation that you're avoiding? The one that leaves you wondering, well, what should I say? How do I say it? And then if I do speak up, won't I make things worse? Well, Sarah has an upcoming workshop that you can attend where she will teach you a simple framework to help you lean into this conversation so you know exactly what to say, so that you can keep your emotions in check and speak from your values with self-trust. You'll get a private one-on-one session with Sarah, along with live group coaching sessions and daily guidance so that you don't feel like you're doing this alone. So head over to sarahfisk.coach/say it.
And so I teach the skill that needs to be learned. And then I also teach you how to manage that overwhelming emotional fear, worry, anxiety that is so normal for when you start speaking up and being more honest. So we worked through, what are you going to say to the barista? And when you say that, why does it make so much sense that you're going to be feeling anxious? What are we going to do with that anxiety? And so when she came back for, the next session, she was like, oh my gosh, I did it, right? I slid my coffee back across the counter and I said, you know what? I don't think this is what I ordered. Can we try that again? Oh. That was the sentence that she had come up with. She had practiced it. She had let herself practice feeling that anxiety. And so when it came time to do it, yes, it was still anxiety producing for her, but she had practiced. She knew how to have her own back. And that win for her felt like $1 million, because it was the beginning of her teaching herself, you can do this. So we got to learn new skills and learn how to handle the emotion that comes up when we put those skills in practice.
Great. So now this person's feeling great. I'm a rock star because I asked for the right drink. I don't know. This change doesn't happen overnight. right? I mean, this is probably you working with people for probably months and months on end. So, kind of those are the first steps. Then, what are some other things that you do when you're coaching women to just kind of start to really build that muscle so that it stays, so that it's not just this temporary band aid of, oh, I went to some women's retreat and I feel empowered. And 1 month later, I'm back to who I used to be.
I hear that. And it is what happens when you don't have the support to change. I mean, Ali, people pleasing is a core way that we satisfy the two most human, we satisfy the two basic human needs. Am I safe? Am I connected?
Wow.
And so we're not going to change that overnight because it's dealing with such core human issues, safety and connection. And even if I'm just worried that the Starbucks barista isn't going to like me when I return my coffee, that has an effect on my nervous system. And so when I do this work with women, we do it in a group, we do it for 6 months, and we're learning the skills that we need. And then I'm coaching them on how to handle those big emotions. And we're just doing that over and over and over again in the situations that come up in their real life. Because that is the curriculum, right? That God, I believe, when he sends us here to, to this planet, it's the curriculum that we work with, our relationships, how it shows up. And then just by working through their daily lives, there's a lot of progress that can be made, even in 6 months.
What would you say surprises them the most once they've gone through these 6 months of working with you, building this muscle? What kind of surprises them once this guilt is gone, this shame and this criticism? Like what's kind of some maybe aha moments that appear?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. I think what surprises them is that they can actually have the close, connected, vulnerable, intimate relationships that they really, truly, in their heart of hearts want to have. They just didn't know how to get.
Oh, can we talk about vulnerability for a minute? Because we talk a lot about vulnerability and authenticity. How do you allow for vulnerability or authenticity when that can get you hurt? And if what we have been trying to do in being a good girl is not get hurt, is not get separated, is not get criticism, how can we show vulnerability without maybe showing weakness? How can we embrace that as a kind of a power in itself?
That is a great question. And it gets to the heart of what people pleasers spend a lot of time doing, which is performing what they think other people want to see from them. I remember in the first couple months after being married to my husband, we lived in Texas and we went to Six Flags in San Antonio. It's a big theme park there. Mm-hmm. And we got through the front gate and we started heading toward one of the roller coasters. And I stopped and said, I actually don't like roller coasters. And he says, what? You love roller coasters. We've been on them many times before. And I said, I was just doing that because I thought you liked it. Wow. And so now we're married, like I've got you in the bag, so I don't have to keep up that performance anymore. And of course he said, why didn't you tell me this before we paid whatever, to get in here? But in vulnerability, the thing that kills vulnerability is performance, pretending. And people pleasers are always performing. And that's paradox. It's so sad because what people pleasers are thinking, if I perform this thing that I think you want, you will love me. But then I was performing liking roller coasters, and my husband has this completely different, it's a small example, I know, but right. He has this different idea of who I am. He doesn't really know me. And I feel that in our relationship. And so if you keep performing and pretending, people don't know who you really are. And you, over time, begin to feel lonely and separate. And the worry kind of creeps in. I've heard this from so many women. If they knew who I really was, would they even like me? Would they want me? Would they want to be connected to me? And so the very weirdly ironic door to vulnerability is showing people who you are. It's having honest conversations, having difficult conversations. It's letting people really see you and know you, which can feel terrible on the front end, but on the back end produces such connection, such intimacy, and such vulnerability.
Oh my goodness, you are speaking words to my heart. How does it, when we start to trust in ourselves, right? How does that change us from overthinking every decision?
You're going to love this answer because it is totally possible to stop doing that. But the way to stop is a little counterintuitive. And it kind of gets back to, you were talking earlier about the part of us that is really critical of ourselves, right? We each have different parts that are trying to help us. And one part that is critical and one part that is overthinking, they are actually trying to help us not repeat behavior that got us, quote unquote, punished, right? If you're in a conversation and you say something and you kind of notice that the women in the group kind of side eye each other, you get the message, "Ooh, I shouldn't have said that. That's a little awkward. They didn't like that." And so your overthinker part is going to be like, "Why did you say that? What is the matter with you?" You're right. And that part is actually trying to help you not repeat that mistake. And so the way is to realize that that part is not me. I am capable of being wise and loving and generous and even just present with discomfort. And I like to imagine that that little part is just trying to get my attention and is telling me, "Sarah, I'm so scared that if you keep saying shit like that, you're not going to have any friends left and we're going to be all alone. So you got to stop. And I'm going to help you stop by just bringing it up over. You know, when your little girl was like, mom, yes. Right? She's just trying to get your attention. And so I imagine that that little version is actually a little version of me, who was lonely and wanted friends and couldn't figure out, how do I become friends with people? How do I make people like we all remember what it was like to want friends. Yes. And so when I can characterize that part of me as a little part of me, or like a little version of me, I can bring her in for a hug and I can say, "Oh, baby. Yeah. I totally understand why you're worried about that. I did notice the side eye going on. I did. And if you're embarrassed or if you're feeling stressed about that, it's totally okay. And I'm just going to be right here with you. That feeling won't be here for a long time. And it's okay. That's all right."
What a tender visual for sure. And I guess if someone is listening right now and they're stuck in people pleasing, what's one question that they should ask themselves?
That's a great question, which is essentially, do I like the way my life is going right now? Do I like this? And I think there are some times when I do want to people please, right? If you and I are friends and I know you love chocolate chip cookies and you're having a bad day, I'm going to show up on your doorstep with some chocolate chip cookies because I know that's going to, quote unquote, please you and help you. But notice it's because I like my reasons and because I've thought it through. It's not an automatic reaction to try to get you to like me. It's because I like my reasons for showing up for you. So just ask yourself, do I like the way my life is going? And then if that kind of feels hard, there are 3 emotions that I think of as like women's best friends: anger, envy, and dread. Ooh. Because those 3 emotions anger always points us in the direction of where we are not either saying something that needs to be said or taking care of ourselves in a way that we need to be taken care of. Ooh. Our envy tells us what we want. Because when I used to look at women on stage, talking about what they love. And I would think, oh my gosh, sit down. You know what? Okay, fine. Yes, you've got your life figured out. Well, okay. Right? But envy was underneath that. And then third, dread. Dread tells you where you have overstepped your boundaries and where you have either said yes or allowed things to happen that you don't want. And so if, that first question that I asked of, do I like the way my life is going, doesn't really land for you, just start paying attention to where those emotions show up and ask yourself if you want something different.
Because I've been thinking you've got a really phenomenal workshop coming up, and I'd love to hear more about it. And kind of, if I'm someone who's listening and I'm like, man, I can see I need some help. I need more Sarah in my life. Tell us about what are kind of some of the things we'll take away. So tell us a little bit more about it.
Yes, it kind of gets to the heart of the one skill that I think is the most important, because we all have situations and relationships in which we don't say the thing that needs to be said, whether it's to the Starbucks barista or to the long-term partner or to the boss, right? There's always one thing that so many women wish they could do or say. And when you boil it all down, if you're people pleasing, you are saying yes and feeling resentful and angry and burdened. So you're uncomfortable. You're saying yes and you're feeling very uncomfortable. And what I want to teach you to do is to say what you really want to say and still feel uncomfortable. It's just a different kind of discomfort. Maybe now you're anxious or fearful that they won't like you, but that is the discomfort of growth. And so in this workshop, it's called Say What You Need to Say. And in 1 week, I'm going to teach you a couple things. Like, number one, we're going to land on what is a low risk conversation that you have been wanting to have that will help you switch from the discomfort of being stuck in people pleasing to the discomfort of growth. I'm not going to lie and tell you that it's going to feel amazing the time when you tell the Starbucks barista that he's got your order wrong. It's not. It's going to feel very scary, but you can handle it. And I can teach you the skills to support yourself and feel that fear and do it anyway. So we're going to find that conversation. I'm going to teach you how to find exactly the right words for you. Because that's another thing we spend a lot of time on is, how should I say it so they don't get mad? How should I say it so that, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to teach you how to find exactly the right words. And then I'm going to teach you how to feel that uncomfortable feeling of fear or anxiety or worry or whatever it is and do it anyway.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, you have my commitment to be there. I was going to ask you, what's a small but courageous step that we could take to sort of start to build momentum? And I think you just answered it there. I guess, my final thoughts here, or I guess, a question I'd have for you is just, if someone is feeling like this conversation has been a really great start, hopefully they're going to show up to this workshop. If they don't, and they're listening to this a little bit later on, what would you want them to know?
First, that they deserve to be seen and to be loved and to be supported and held the same way that they do that for other people. They deserve relationships that feel deeply satisfying and enriching and connected and vulnerable. That is the best part of the human experience, and they can have it. There is a very clear set of skills that will get you those relationships as they are ready. And I'm there to support and always point themselves back to, you're wise, you are capable, and you deserve to feel loved and seen and known.